All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our leadership podcast. I'm joined today with Charles Higgins, this wonderful soul. We met, I think it was through, how was it? Alignable, I think,
Alignable. Yep.
through speed dating for business.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and so the really cool thing I think that we connected over on that call was the fact that we both used to be in the automotive industry, which has absolutely sparked us into this phase of our lives, into our entrepreneurial journeys, um, which was fantastic to see. Because I think I remember you saying when I said, I used to be in the automotive industry, da da da, and you're like, shut the front door. Or you were like, get out of here, like something like that. And I'm
Yep.
like, or you're like, are you serious right now? I'm like, yes.
Yep.
So
Yep.
Charles has a beautiful CRM system, a beautiful platform. He is the founder of Pinnacle AI, and this takes all of the innovations of technology and it utilizes AI and it utilizes outreach. And it's a beautiful, to me, it's a beautiful creation of how do we get the best customer journey and how do we get the entrepreneur to have the most seamless journey through using beautiful technological tools that not all of us are in love with, right? Like not all of us
Yeah.
love to do this type of thing. But how do we really capture those customer moments and how do we really like reach out to our customers in the best way and support them in the best way that we can? Um, so you used your automotive background
Hmm.
to come up with this brilliant, beyond brilliant idea. So why don't we just start there? Just take me through, your background a little bit, and then
Yeah.
how this idea really came about for you.
Yeah. So, we definitely related on the automotive side. I came from 25 years in automotive. I was at the corporate level with Toyota and Ford Motor Company. And I started in the mid late 90s when CRMs were still kind of a wall of Rolodexes at that time. Websites were first starting to come out. So I got to see the whole evolution of technology in automotive. Now we're buying and leasing cars and getting loans on cars using cryptocurrency. And yeah, I mean, we were still using Rolodexes when I started. So, and doing everything on paper, and fax machines. So, it was a fun journey. But I learned so much, through working with the manufacturers, in the technology side, in digital marketing, and then also working with top companies like Cox Automotive, where they were really innovating first party data and, they own a large amount of real estate in automotive. But one of the things that I really, when it came to CRMs, there was never a perfect solution, and there isn't. There is no perfect solution. But I was able to get a lot of feedback over 25 years from owners, from managers, from salespeople to service technicians, from top to bottom, all their complaints and frustrations. And of course, they're all very different, because they come from totally different viewpoints, different use cases. And when I was with Ford, my last position with Ford was for rural market development in technology. And so my job was to go into these small mom and pop stores and take them out of the Rolodex age and put them into today's technology. Well, while doing that, a large part of that mission was to get them connected with more of their local businesses because in those small towns, those dealerships had a huge impact on the local community. They're usually the biggest tax contributor to that area. So, they play a very pivotal role in those small towns. And so I would go out and meet these other small mom and pop businesses, local businesses, put together partnerships and co-advertising campaigns. And um, what I realized was that a lot of the struggles that we saw in automotive with adapting technology, it was 100 times worse with these small businesses. And you get down to really small business where it was basically just a solo operator I mean, it was non-existent. And their business suffered because of it. They complained of not being able to grow and scale effectively, weren't at a point where they could hire. And that was kind of my cue to say, okay, it's time you took all this knowledge that you have and put it somewhere where people can benefit from it even more, where they can really utilize the technology, but it had to be affordable. You think of entrepreneurs and small businesses, small startups, they can't afford to spend, 2,500, 5,000, $10,000 a month like a dealership can. A dealership, yeah, 2,500 to 5 grand for a CRM is pretty
No big
normal.
deal. Yeah.
Not that big of a deal. Of course, they're also spending, 50 to $100,000 a month in advertising.
Yeah.
Um, your small business is not doing that. They're lucky if they can scrape by a few $100s. And so I set out on a mission in 2019 to start to conceptualize this process of first getting out of automotive and transitioning into my own business, but then bringing the technology that I'd fallen in love with throughout the years into the hands of everyday entrepreneurs, small businesses, other professional sales people, whether they're in finance or insurance, real estate, whatever the industry was. I wanted to bring forward a platform that gave them the ability to really grow their business, to scale it, to get that foundation in place so that they could grow and scale effectively without breaking the bank. So yeah, that's kind of how I started my journey. 2020 we launched, and for a lot of people, it was a rough year. For us, it was a great time to launch an online software program because
Yeah.
everybody that wasn't already online suddenly had to get online.
Suddenly was online.
Right. Yeah. They're like, oh, guess we got to do this now. So it provided a lot of opportunity for us, and we were able to connect with a lot of local businesses and entrepreneurs that knew that they had to pivot into technology, having more of an online presence and online communication with their customers to provide that customer support. Um, so yeah, that's how we got started. So
I love it. I love it. So we've got, not only do we have like the innovation, right? But we've got someone who, you're someone that you've seen this need, over, almost 3 decades, and you're like, "Whew, I got to do something here," right? Like there's a huge, huge opportunity for me to support local businesses and for me to come in and really, and I think that speaks to like leadership in such a huge way, because you're able to support then and be a leader of the local communities and the local
mhm.
little guy, really, and help them to. So first of all, thank you, because obviously we use your CRM and we love it. We love it for all the tools that are in it. Now, when it comes to the size of your system and how many integrations you've done and how many different things are involved, what kind of team do you typically work with from a day-to-day standpoint, or
So
monthly, whatever, however it works
yeah.
for you?
So our team on the engineering and development side is just over 800 at this point. Last year we've more than doubled in the last year. We're always rolling out new technology, new integrations. We just, this last year we rolled out just over 140 custom integrations to try to keep everything in one place so you're not having to go get all these different subscriptions. But we understand that we're not the only tool that you're going to need to use. And so we're creating a lot of connections to third-party platforms. Um, our dev team is just over 800. We have just over 300 on our support team. They do anything from record videos, take screenshots for help documents, write blog articles talking about new features that came out. Then we have our chat support team, our Zoom support team, and then we also
The
have our
chat support I
onboarding
use
team.
all the time.
Yeah.
That's
So, and then we
fantastic.
have our onboarding team, where they go through and they help set up accounts, get people familiar. And then we've got another team that does all our online courses to help people learn the platform. Because what's the tool if you don't, sure, you can go buy the fanciest tool out there, but if it doesn't come with an instruction manual, probably not going to use it that much. So we really focus a lot on documentation, training, and support, and along with our onboarding. So.
Awesome. So for you as like the owner and founder, what's it like for you to be working with, all of these different teams on a regular basis? And is there anything, like, well, let's talk about the struggles that you have, right? Because everyone knows that
Yeah.
like business is not the easiest thing in the world. So what kind of struggles do you have and how do you deal with those with the internal teams that you're working with day in and day out?
I think one of the things, when we first started, we did typical kind of from an online company standpoint because we're all remote. We're all over the globe. So we took the kind of typical approach and went Slack. We were doing everything in Slack. We were doing Hangouts in Slack, and that was okay. But as we started to scale, we saw a large separation between a large separation in culture. We were losing our culture fast. Yes, we were communicating, but there was no feel to it. It was very transactional. It was, it just wasn't the culture that I wanted for my company, and it felt like it was hurting my company. And so we ended up actually switching over to a platform called Kumo Space. We love Kumo Space. It is essentially an online office. It makes you feel like you're back in an office building, which in many regards, when you're working in teams, we have a lot of different departments that have to work together on things. They have to be able to communicate with each other. And, working remote is nice, but then you also miss that camaraderie that you get from being in a building, being able to just go over and pick on someone, give them a little bit of a hard time. That all leads to culture. And I think
Hmm.
it's important. A lot of people say, oh, no, you go to work. And yes, but at the same time, you have to have fun at what you're doing. And if you can't
Yeah,
have fun and enjoy coming to work, if you're not looking forward to coming to work, seeing your coworkers, interacting with them, working on things together, it's just not going to work long term. You're going to have people that burn out. You're going to have people that demand more money because the culture's so bad, they want to get paid more just to put up with it.
right. Which is always a
And
temporary solution,
it
right? Like
is,
in a
yeah,
year or
yep,
2 years, they'll be back asking for more money because, like you said, it's really about that culture. And there's a piece
yep,
missing within the organization, whether it's just their
yep,
department or the company as a whole.
yeah. And I think for, online businesses, for remote companies, there's a lot of companies that are highly remote now, or they're not making it fully mandatory to come back into the office. But if you look at the successful ones, they've all implemented systems like we have. And it's to create an environment to where they still feel connected to each other, where they can, Kumo Space, it's laid out just like an office floor. There's private offices, there's larger rooms where they can go huddle together, sit at a work table, share their screen, their video, their audio, impromptu, and you see everybody on the floor. So you're able to go into the office and see who's working that day, or if they're in a Zoom call or whatever it may be. And you can just double click and walk over and say, hey, you got a minute? I need help with something. And that creates a good work culture. That camaraderie and knowing that you're there for each other. And so that's what we focus a lot on. When it comes to the struggles, working, it's very much about trust and delegation. Um, I don't get involved in 99% of the stuff that goes on, daily operations.
Yeah.
I try to stay as far out of as possible. I I'm very careful of who I hire. And I will certainly fire very quickly. But which is always a good practice. But, it's more, I put my trust in them. I hired them for a reason. I put them in a leadership position for a reason. and I need to trust that they can do their job. Um, so most of my checking in is more on the culture side. I'll jump in and we have weekly meetings, and most of those weekly meetings, I don't really need to be there for. I just need a report at the end of it saying, "Hey, this is where we're at." I go in to ask how everybody's doing, how their week's been, what they do this last weekend. I've got one gal that works for me. She never fails. She is always bundled up with a blanket, and I give her a hard time about it every time, but she loves it, and but that's that camaraderie. That is that
Yeah.
culture. And that was one of the things that I learned what not to do from automotive. Um, so I took everything that I learned that certainly did not work in automotive and said, okay, I'm going to do the complete opposite of that. I'm going to make it to where people feel like they can come to me and
Right.
talk to me as an owner. And I think that's where a lot of operators, whether you're a COO or you're a small team, doesn't matter. Um, Even if you're the CEO, you need to be approachable. Your employees, your team members should feel like they can come to you at any point about anything. One of the most impactful moments I ever had was actually in automotive. I had a young lady, she was going through a really hard time. She had only been working for us for about month and a half, 2 months, and she did pretty good. But shortly after she got hired, her performance started going down. She was showing up late. And I pulled her in the office and said, "Look, I don't care what's going on. Just be honest with me. I can't read minds. I'm good at a lot of things. I can't read minds. I know something's going on because your performance drastically changed." And it took some very, me being very humble and approaching her just from a person to person standpoint, not from employer to employee. Turned out her and her boyfriend had split up. She was homeless. She was sleeping in her car. It was a horrible situation. So what do we do? I said, first thanked her, appreciated how hard it was for her to say that, and then we paid for a hotel room for 3 months so she could get back on her feet. We didn't charge it back to her. We never asked for any money back, and she ended up being Employee of the Year. But you have to communicate, you
Oh my
know.
goodness. I just got full
It
body chills because
Yeah, I mean,
like you said, like in automotive, that would have never happened, right?
right.
Like something like that. Even I almost felt like in automotive, even when you had someone who was a fantastic mentor or something like that, it's like they were choosing out of the goodness of their heart and like because they're a good person to mentor you, to support you, to ask how you're really doing and to go above and beyond. Where like the culture overall,
Hmm.
not gonna
Yeah.
happen. So
Yeah, and I
that's
think, I
incredible.
mean, that's an employee for life.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And she's been great. Yeah, I could have fired her. Could have said it's not my problem. But at the end of the day, we're all people, and we have to understand that. It's not just about, yes, numbers are important. I'm not going to say that they're not, but you have to realize that people are still people, and part of being a leader is understanding that and, making sure that you're taking care of the people that are taking care of you. And so, yeah, I'm all about, look, tell me your silly stories from the weekend. I want to get to know you. And it's hard when you've got, over 1,000 employees. It's hard, and I know each of them in their own way. But yeah, I jump into Kumo space and I'll go over and I'll hang out with them and say, "Hey, what's up? What are you doing? What are you working on? Anything I can help with?" Of course, they always tell me no. They usually want the, like, "No, Charles, we don't want your help." Um, but you know, they know I'm there.
Yeah.
And that culture spreads as we continue to hire. We're hiring again right now. Um, you know, as that culture really stays established, I don't have to worry about that culture spreading to new employees because, we did a survey amongst our employees and they said one of the biggest things that they love is the camaraderie. They love that we feel like a family. We talk to each other, we joke around, give each other a hard time. Um, and because of that, ever since made that switch out of the corporate Slack and we went more like, hey, let's just worry about our culture and then everything else will come along with it. Our production levels went up. Our overall employee satisfaction went up. We had less call outs. I mean, just everything got better. A lot of those frustration points that you deal with as an operator, as a employer. So,
We could stop the call right here, and this is gold, man. This is gold. Seriously.
oh,
Because I think one of the biggest things that we find with companies is that there's no culture. The culture sucks, it doesn't exist. Or the other thing that I'm really big on is like, what are the pillars, right? What's the pillars, the mission, the vision? And how many companies, and you don't have to say if the ones you formerly worked at align up with this or not. I know that mine did, but it's like, and I used to have to train those things. I would train all of our new people on the pillars, the mission, the vision, and I would be going through our core values, and I'm like, that's bullshit. That's a joke. We don't do
yeah,
that. That's
yep.
right.
Been
And
there. Yeah.
and and that's one of like the first things is like I just remember being in that role and I was like, I feel like I am lying to all these people every time I stand up here and I give this spiel. Like it was like
Yep.
I was dying a little bit inside because I'm like, this is not true. Right. And the culture, it wasn't there. But I love the piece about like the connection and literally doing the opposite of what you did in automotive
Hmm.
and I know that I was guilty of this, of like the work life separation. Like
Yep.
the two are separate, never the two shall meet. I remember having a maintenance guy one time be like, so you just had a birthday. I'm like, yeah. I don't know how you know that, but yeah. I'm like, is it posted somewhere? He's like, ah, I saw it on Facebook. I'm like, I'm not even friends on Facebook. And he's like, what? Well, how old are you? Because I noticed that like the year wasn't on there. And I'm like, yeah, it's not on there for a reason. Right? But
Yeah.
and maybe he was being nosy. Maybe that was his way of trying to forge a
Yeah.
connection. But in that we'll call it culture because it is a culture, not a great
Yeah.
one, but in that culture, that's how a lot of things go, unless you get some of those really awesome, like break out of the mold people that just want to be friends
Yeah.
with everyone and, never know a stranger.
Yeah, it's more of the exception to the rule. And when I started in automotive, and granted, it's a lot better than it used to be, and it is getting better every day. There are some movers out there that are trying to make it better in automotive. When I started, I mean, the culture was very much throwing a phone book at your head, um, quite literally, or taking you out back and literally getting in a fight. Now that doesn't happen anymore, thankfully. But there's a lot of benefit that comes from developing those core values, developing your mission statement, and really making decisions by them, and being transparent. I used to laugh all the time. There was a dealer group that I worked with and as a consultant, and they had a set of core values, and they had them posted like in the break rooms, they had them posted in the conference rooms, and I'm like, these are really good core values, and I did see where they were making decisions because I would be in with the executive team, and they would straight call people out, like, look, that does not go along with that core value. We can't do that. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of nice. Um, but they would never market it anywhere. I'm
Oh,
like, why in
really?
the world are you not telling customers about your core values, what your mission statement is, what you believe in? And they're like, well, we just don't post it anymore. I'm like, Well, that's a mistake. I mean, we have our core values on our what if you go to our About Us page, our core values are right there. We want you to hold us accountable. And I think, from a consumer level, whether you're doing B2B or B2C, it doesn't matter. People and companies appreciate that. If you're putting it out there transparently and you're asking to be held accountable, because even if you have taken the step of coming up with these core values, with these mission statements that align with your vision of your company, if you're not letting the public hold you accountable, are you really holding yourself accountable to them? Because, I mean, we all know how it is. You think, like, I've got 3 kids, you know, there's a lot of unwritten rules that come up on the fly. Let me tell you. Any parent
Give us an
knows that.
example.
You, you know, so there's a lot of, yeah, no, we're gonna backtrack that original answer from a year ago, and it's something different now. Um, but we can do that as parents because those rules aren't written down anywhere. It's the same thing in your company. If they're not written down anywhere, if they're nowhere for anybody to hold you accountable to, now if I had them written down somewhere, my child could say, "Oh no, Dad, you got this rule written right here, and
Then
it
they probably
says
would,
that
right?
we can't." Oh, absolutely. And I'd be like, you know what? You're right. I guess we're gonna have to go with that for right now, but know that we're gonna have a discussion about it, and we may have to change this. Times have changed or whatever. But it's I think it's super important. It also bonds your company culture to something. And so that way everybody kind of aligns around that. And of course, it'll expand and it'll grow upon that. And each person will have kind of their own slightly different take off of it based on their own personal experiences, their own culture. We see it a lot because we're dealing with people all over the globe. So
Right.
culturally, some of this stuff means more to others than some, or
Mm.
they perceive it slightly different than another culture would. Um, but yeah, it's super important. You have to hold yourself and your company and your team accountable by those, but let the public do it. You need that accountability. It'll only help your company grow stronger, and really force you to look at yourself in the mirror. And I think that's where a lot of people get comfortable and where the leadership tends to fall apart is that we get comfortable in the sense of, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to shut the door to that mirror over there. I don't have to look at it right now. I'm just going to make my decision and I'll worry about looking in the mirror later. But if you're opening yourself up to the public about what you stand for, what your core values are, you're basically taking that door off the hinges and saying, okay, I'm not going to be able to shut this door now. I have to follow along with this. So,
I love it. I love it because these are all of the things that we stand for. These are all of the things that we work with clients on about like how is your culture, right? Like what do your employees say and think and feel versus what you think
right,
they think, right? Because that's
right.
a huge
Yep.
difference too. So how do you deal with that when you have an employee that either isn't in alignment with the culture or the employee feels like you're and maybe you haven't had this as an example, but or where the employee is like, I know the culture is supposed to be this, but it's really not. So how do you deal with situations like that?
So we do internal surveys once a month. We have a lot of employees coming in, so we do internal surveys every month. Um, they're not required. We do have about a just over 90, we're just scraping under 91% adoption rate. And we make them not required as a point, um, because we don't want them to feel like they have to. Um, they are anonymous, but it really keeps us in tune of what's going on. But you know how it is when you're working for a company and they say, "Oh, it's an anonymous survey." You're like, "Yeah, no, it's not."
Yep.
So, and that's why we make it not required because look, if you don't feel comfortable with it, that's fine. I totally get it. Um, but then, when we see those concerns come up, we try to address them as immediately as possible. Either I will put out a video. I usually do any announcements via video because I want them to see my face. I want them to see that, sure, I could send an email, you know, I'll tell you what, if I never see an internal corporate communication email in my life, I will be happy. Um, don't hide. And I make it a point to be on video. I record a Loom video, I send it to, the entire company, and because I want them to see, I want them to hear my tone, I want them to see my face, see that I'm genuine, that I do care. I want to be able to ad lib and talk naturally, like person to person. And from that, I've had employees come up to me because they felt comfortable. You know, they didn't get pointed out, they didn't get singled out by anything, and they would come to me and say, "Look, this is really it was me. This is really what I'm struggling with." And I just have a person to person. It's never employer to employee. It is always person to person. And then if I can provide a way, sometimes it's just the way that they're viewing it. And so I have to encourage them to look at it from more than one side of the box, which has always been relatively easy for me um, because of how I grew up. My parents were 30 years in age difference. So I had a dad that was from the 30s, retired military, Irish Catholic, I mean, he's as clean cut as they come. And then I had my mom from the 60s and 70s that was a flower child. Um, so I'm used to seeing things from two different sides of the box. But not everybody can do that easily. And so it's like, hey, I totally respect and understand where you're coming from. And looking at it from that point, I see why it upsets you. I understand. You can't ever degrade how they're feeling because to them, it means something. There is a logic behind that. It may not make sense to you. You may not agree with it. That's okay. You don't have to. The point is to be in a leadership role. Your job is to level with them. And by level with them, I don't mean throw down the hammer, as that's what most people will do. Um, it's take away the positions and just talk to them like a human being. See how you can resolve that situation and expand their thought process. And more times than not, if you're taking off the badge of your title and you're just removing the company aspect of it and looking at it from a person to person standpoint, you'd be surprised how much resolution just comes out of that with nothing needing to be changed. But then other
Yeah.
times you're like, okay, actually, I never saw it from that standpoint. That's a really good point. I tell you what, I am going to make it a point. We're going to put it on the agenda, and I will show them where I'm putting it on my agenda or on my calendar to talk to my leadership team about it and say, this has been brought to my attention. We have some employees that are taking offense to this, or they don't really like this, or they wish we would do something different. How can we accommodate this without, totally breaking everything? Is there a way that we could accommodate this? Do we need to hire someone to be able to accommodate this? If it all it takes is hiring someone, I'm more than willing to do that because I know if there's one person that came forward about it, there's a ton that didn't, and there's going to be
It's like
more.
cockroaches, right?
Yeah, yeah. So,
One, it's not just
yeah,
one.
that's right. So if I can, and I think that's where a lot of leaders get lost is they're looking just at the number, and they're like, oh
Mm,
well, I've only had one or two people complain about this. They can just get over it. Let me
yeah.
tell you, there are way more people that want to say that, but maybe they rely on their job too much to put their job in jeopardy to say something,
Yeah.
or
If
they're
they don't feel
brand new.
safe
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
And if they
They could be
don't,
brand
if
new.
they've never
Yeah.
been in an environment like that before where they're used to having that happen, because I think a lot of people are, we'll go back to automotive again, right? Like a lot of people, they're not gonna say anything. Like, pardon my
Yeah.
phrase, but they wouldn't say shit if they had a mouthful of it, right?
Right.
Kind of a thing. And not everyone, like, I know that I will be that person to speak up, right? I'll be like, that's
Yep.
some bullshit right there. Like, wait, that
Mhm.
can't happen, right? But not everyone is like that. Not everyone, like you said, that they could be
Right.
reliant on this job. They don't want to make waves, so they don't want to say anything at all. Or
Yeah.
maybe that's just part of their culture or part of their individual personality, is to not speak up and to not say anything. But that's a huge point, that if you've got one person that's willing to come forward and to say these things, or to bring it to your attention, you have to take it seriously.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, there's been a lot of companies as of late that have really, Cox Automotive has done a great job of this actually. They have found where they have had employees that have felt pushed off to the side. Women in automotive. We'll take women in automotive, for example.
But
Yeah, I mean, for decades, women were stomped to the ground in automotive. Even in the corporate side, they
Mhm.
just were not regarded, forget the manufacturing side, just on the corporate side, in the office job, they were still diminished. And of course, there's been a lot of movement in that. It's not near as bad as what it used to be. It's gotten way better. But there were some people, some women at Cox Automotive that were felt like Cox wasn't doing what they should do, as far as making it as equal as possible. And they had some people come forward. So what they did is they ended up forming a committee based off of those people. Like, you know what? You're right. How about we start a committee? You guys run it. You take a hold of it. And I think, there's been times in my own company where I've had people approach me with, "Hey, we're seeing this problem. We think we have a solution, but it's going to involve some intervention, or we may need to hire someone." Great. Sounds like you've got a plan. Tell you what, why don't you run with it? Let me know what you need. If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know, but I'm not going to handcuff you. I'm not going to say, you know what? No, we'll have our leadership team take care of that. You don't need to worry about that. That's above your pay grade.
Which,
Stop
if I
doing
when
that.
I hear that, oh, we'll have the leadership team take care of it, it's like, oh,
You're
okay,
like,
that's
okay,
falling on deaf ears
that's
and no
never going to
one's going to do
happen.
anything with it. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Let that lower level employee, if they've got a good idea, let them run with it. Just,
It's super
if you want to check in
empowering
and
to the
say, hey,
employee.
just give me your plan, check in with me, don't go all crazy on me, but I like your plan so far. Give me some more details of how you would actually execute this. And I tell you what, let's have a meeting next week and we can go over it. That right there, not only will that most likely be one of your next leaders, but that will empower the entire culture of your company. Because I promise you, that conversation is not going to stop there.
No,
That entry level position employee is going to go tell everybody else that you will not believe. I just talked to our boss. We've talked about this amongst ourselves. I told him our idea and he said, run with it. He just wants a follow-up meeting in a week to see what we have come up with. Like that sparks so many ideas because trust me, most of the ideas that we come up with are not my own.
right.
They
They
come
come
from
from
my
the people
team.
that do the job, right?
Exactly.
Like, if you're the
But if they
person doing the
don't
job,
feel invested,
yeah.
if they don't feel part of the company, and this goes down to the person that is picking up the trash. We used to call them, the porters, that would, just move cars. That's all they did. They would just move cars from one position on the dealership lot to another. That's it. They'd line up cars and move them around. Um, but even that low of an entry point, they may see something that nobody else sees. And just because they're at a super entry level position doesn't mean that they can't have good ideas.
Yeah,
You know, it's not about you coming up with all the ideas. If you're, hey, if you can do everything and come up with all the ideas, why even have a team? Um,
exactly. Exactly.
so you need to rely on them for more than just, doing their job.
Yeah,
Because those are your future leaders. Those are the people that are going to come up into your leadership. And, who knows? You may
those are
come
the
up with a
people you
new
want.
leadership position. They are.
Those are the people
They
you
are because
want.
they're never going to go anywhere. They're
Exactly.
never going to go anywhere.
Exactly.
Had in automotive, if people, and then listen, I am about as blunt as they come, and I do not have a problem telling people where to shove it, if I don't like something. I was always like that in automotive. Controversially, I was like that. Um,
Same.
Not everybody liked it, for
That's true.
sure, but there were the right people at the right time that respected my opinion and said, you know what, run with it. And that ultimately is what led to me having a great and successful corporate career, and being able to work with dealerships all over the country and, really make an impact in the automotive industry. Had people shoved me down into my position, think of all the impact that I wouldn't have had.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
there would be dealerships that would be out of business right now because I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been there with Ford late in my career, doing those small town implementations. That I was a small town guy that loved technology. I was a perfect fit. I'd been in the
Yeah.
business for 20 years at that point, and but if I'd been constantly shoved down, I would have never made it that far.
And like
I'd,
from the leader position too. Like
Mhm.
how good does that feel when you've got someone that comes forward and they're like, "Hey, we know that there's this problem, but if you did this, like we know that that would fix it." Or we have a really good
Yep.
idea that if you do this, this, and this, and you're like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." Because A, not only did you probably not even know that the issue existed to begin with, but now you don't have to worry about trying to find a solution because there already is one. The
Yeah.
experts, the people who do it every
Yep.
single day, and this is the thing that used to
Yep.
just it drives me nuts sometimes, with and God love engineers, but a lot of the times they think that they know everything.
Yep.
The operator can't be right. The person who's doing this position or this job, they can't be right. They don't know what they're talking about. And I can tell you, like, the interaction that I had with one of my first engineers, and good old boy from backwoods Tennessee, he's
Yeah.
like, no, this guy knows what he's talking about. And like he was on that line almost as much as I was, if not more sometimes. I'm like, what are you doing down here? He's like, oh, just stopping by. Like he would stop by 2, 3 times a day. Like it was like clockwork.
Yep.
Like, comes in, goes to the line, checks on the people, makes sure they're good, goes up to his office, comes back like when he's leaving for lunch, coming back for lunch, leaving for the right, like always checking in,
Yep.
always seeing what's going on. And that's what real leaders do. They're always
It
checking
is.
in.
And it's not to say that, like you take that manufacturing aspect of it, use that as an example. The person on the line, they may have a very valid point about something needing to change at that one point in that assembly line. It's not to say that they have a good or bad idea. They have an idea that needs to be explored on both sides of the table because they may not understand how that one change would affect something 10, 20, 30 steps down the line. You
Yep.
know, and that's not their fault, but it is a point of connection and a point of education. So if you can say, you know what, I totally see where you're coming from. Let's play this out. And let me explain to you why we can't do it that way. Because I actually agree with you. I think it would work better, but even I unfortunately I can't implement it because of this. And explain don't just tell them that it can't be done. Explain to them why. Educate
Yes.
them, teach them,
Yes.
because then they will appreciate the response. It's not a dismissive response, and that it makes them want to open up their mind more. They want to learn more about the entire operation, not just their one little spot, because they're like, oh wow, I never thought about that. Well, that's kind of interesting. Now I
Mm-hmm.
kind of want to learn more about that because, well, if this could be different, then we could change this. But it gets their mind, it gets them involved in the company. They all of a sudden they are what you want, a full-blown company employee. They're not even an employee at that point. They're an ambassador for your company. They are more invested emotionally and logically in your company, which means that they are way more likely to stay on longer
Mm-hmm.
and treat
Reducing
your
turnover.
customers
Yeah.
I mean it will greatly
The
affect
ripple effects are
the
huge.
whole HR side,
Yeah.
greatly affect the whole HR side. And so yeah, it's really important, and you know, give credit where credit's due. Um every day, most it's so funny, coming from a software side, um anytime you're implementing service or software, you hope that you get a bunch of reviews and testimonials about your actual software. Um, Most of our reviews come based off of our onboarding team and our support team. Like 98% of our reviews. Now, we know people love our technology because they stay on forever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the reviews are all about onboarding and support. Um, but we have done such a great job at that because we always give credit where credit's due. We have a few digital whiteboards in our little virtual office world. And so anytime we get a new review, that's based off of support or onboarding or anything, we post them on those whiteboards for the entire company to see. We want people to know that, hey, appreciate you. If I get a personal message, from someone saying, hey, loved working with this person, give them a raise. I make sure to share that audio or video or message with all the staff. It pumps them up, it keeps them happy. They feel like a part of the company, not just someone on the payroll. And I think
Yeah.
that's just where, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, you have to identify person to person. You can't always be in this employer employee role. Like, you have to break that wall down and understand that at the end of the day, we're all people. We all have emotions. We all deal with things differently. We all look at things differently. And you need to appreciate that and learn how to take the benefit of that. How do you take someone that's, you know, always griping? Well, how are they griping? Are they angry or are they just upset? And is it related to the same category every time? If it is, you may just need to move them into a different position that deals directly with that category. Maybe it's about payroll. Maybe it's about taking breaks or how they're paid on breaks or not paid on breaks or when they get their. Hey, you know what? If you think there's a better way, we're all ears. And I tell you what, you come up with a good way, we'll put you in as an apprentice in payroll so you can implement the change yourself.
I love that.
Oh,
I
by
love
the way,
that.
it comes with a raise too. You know,
Yeah. By the way.
I mean, it creates such an amazing culture. There's so many small things that you can do that will highly impact your culture, and that's without a healthy company culture, you're bound for failure.
Yeah.
Or struggles constantly.
Yep. So let's talk about, and this will probably be the last question. But let's talk about vulnerability. Vulnerability as a leader, because I remember it was probably a year or more ago that Emily and I were on a forum with different founders. All of them were manufacturing guys. So they all had their own manufacturing facilities, things like this. Smaller scale, I think the biggest one was like 200 to 250 employees. And so, we're two women coming in here talking to men in manufacturing about vulnerability and about like being vulnerable with their employees. And we had one guy say, be vulnerable with my employees. Like, I'm not even vulnerable with my own family. Why would I be vulnerable with my employees? So, speak to
Yeah.
me about that a little bit, whatever comes to you.
So it's so funny because I I'm very much my mom says she hates how much I'm like my father. Because I am very old school. I'm very um, you know, separation of church and state. I'm like that's just not what guys in my family talk about. Like we just don't talk about it. We don't talk about feelings, like whatever. I will tell you with my employees, I'm very transparent. I tell them stuff about my personal life all the time. Um, because again, I don't want them to view me as the CEO. I don't want them to just see a title. I don't want them to, think that I don't have a bad day. I have bad days. I have days where my kids absolutely drive me up a wall and I want to wring their necks. Um, I mean, what parent doesn't? I have days where I just don't need to talk to anybody. It's just a bad day. Like, just don't talk to me. I'll be fine tomorrow, but today it's just been one thing after another. And yeah, let's just keep communication to a minimum. But I let my employees know, you know, and I do
Put
it
it
in a
out an
way that
all
they
points bulletin, like stay away from
yeah,
Charles today.
yeah. Um,
Try again
but
tomorrow.
it's just well, and that's one of the benefits of having the Kumo space because I'll put a status message in there of, I'll put myself as away or busy, and I'll put a status of like, what can I say? Teenage son. That's usually all I have to write, and then inherently a handful of them will ask me the next day, so did you get everything worked out? You all right? Is he still alive?
Yeah.
Because they all can relate,
Hmm.
for the most part. And so that's really where I I try to keep my focus is again, we are all people. You know, there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying that you have to give out every dirty detail of your life. Don't do that. Um, but you can certainly give enough information to create that relationship because all it's going to do is strengthen the relationship, strengthen the trust between management and the rest of the team if there is that transparency. And at the end of the day, you want people to feel like they can come to you because if they don't feel like they can come to you, you're not going to know the problems that exist until it's way
Until it's
too
too
late.
late.
I've seen entire I remember this was 2017, 2018. Dealership had just built a brand new dealership, brand spanking new, beautiful dealership. They ended up moving the service department over first because of all the tools and everything that had to be over there. They did their main launch, the grand opening for the new building. Within 1 week, the entire service department walked out because they kept pushing down the noise. Management did. Oh yeah, we'll get to it. 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 Nobody was listening. Next thing they know, they didn't have a service department, and this was a brand new building. Millions of dollars.
Oh,
And it's like okay, well you just go hire. Yeah, it's not that easy to
it's
hire
not that
technicians.
easy. It's
Sure
not
they
that
could get
easy.
so for about a month and a half, 2 months, the only thing they could do was regular maintenance, oil change, tire rotations. They could hire lube guys, but as far as certified technicians, there's a process to that.
Hmm.
And so, it just goes to show, I mean, if you don't relate to your people, if you're not transparent, if you're not open with them, be vulnerable, um, because all they're really going to do is respect you more. They're not going to, and let me tell you, if you have someone that tries to use it against you, that's also a good thing because now you know who you need to fire
Yeah.
and you just fire them and get rid of them because they're bad for the culture.
Yeah.
If they're gonna take it and use it that way, then you know that they're not a good fit for your culture. Hey, they just did you a huge favor. You know, you found that snake lying in the grass, and so you can get rid of them. But everybody else, it's just going to make them feel more empowered, more connected to leadership, which means that they're going to communicate more, they're going to share their ideas because you're starting to remove that feeling of, oh, well, they're way up here and I'm just down here.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself on the same playing field. They still respect authority. It has nothing to
Hmm.
do with
Right.
respect of authority. It just makes you feel approachable as a leader. And if you're not approachable, I promise you, there's going to be things stirring in the background that you have no idea about. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it happen over and over again where people have demised owners, general managers, executive team members to basically be pushed out and they didn't even know it till the last minute. But they put themselves on an island. And if you do that, guess what? Your employees will form a whole nother island that you don't know about. And it will not be pretty when it happens. And it'll cost a ton of time and ton of money, and ultimately the end customer is who's going to suffer the most. So yeah,
This has been a fantastic interview, a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for coming
yeah,
on today. This is
absolutely,
it's music to my ears, right? Because of all of the people
absolutely,
that we see all of the time that we're like culture,
yep,
connection, right? Like
yep,
all of these things, and I'm like, oh man, like you get it. And it's so great to see people that are in the space that are doing big, great, wonderful, amazing things, but also have the leadership skills to back it up. Like it's
yeah,
huge. It's so huge. So thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate you. I
absolutely.
appreciate all that you do. Your service is amazing. Your customer
Appreciate
service
it.
is amazing. Like it's all fantastic. I love
Appreciate
it.
it.
And I'm so grateful to you. So thank you.
Well, it's been great working with you, ladies,
Yeah.
and I'm definitely a believer in what you ladies do. No, keep up the great work and
Thank you.
um, appreciate it
Yeah,
very
and
much.
if
Thanks for
anyone
having
has
me
any
on.
questions or any comments, make sure that you post them. And if there's anything we can answer for you, we will. If not, we'll have Charles's contact information as well, so you can contact him and get a hold of him if there are any questions or anything that you have. So until next time.